There in the distance is Halle, a city in middle Germany in the former East. 250,000 inhabitants. An old city built on the salt trade of the medieval period. And it is here in this forest that we want to explore part of the heritage of Halle. Halle has gone through many transformations, and thus many transformations of heritage. It was part of the industrial heart of Germany before the Second World War. After the war, it was taken over by Soviet troops who built in this region of Germany a communist regime governed by the Socialist Unity Party, the SED. But Halle was in many ways ready for this. It had a strong socialist tradition, a strong communist tradition, going back into the 19th century. This park is what remains of medieval grants to a local bishop, and it became a park over the centuries, over the decades, and is today, in a sense, the lungs of Halle. So what we want to do today is to take a tour through the park, and I want to use an idea from Walter Benjamin. He had the idea that an intellectual can stroll through a city, flanieren, a flaneur, and encounter things upon the way, things that emerge, erupt. And what I want to do today is to walk through these woods and see what these woods are in terms of heritage, what they've become, all of the efforts to create heritage here in the woods. Because this is a collection of trees with a history. This is a city with a history. But heritage is about the willful organization of nature, the willful organization of past and the endowment of it with meaning. So I suppose the first question to ask is, who is this flaneur? Who is going to walk through the woods? There he is, our flaneur. I'm Todd Weir, professor of history and director of the Center for Religion and Heritage in Groningen in the Netherlands. I'm from the United States. And for me, this flanieren, this journey, is also connected to my own past. I studied in East Germany, that is this region of Germany, in the 1980s already, and was very keenly interested in the history of that regime, interested in the history of socialism. So when I come back to Halle to visit friends, I'm struck by all of these traces of my own past, memories of past engagements with the history of this place. And so that is what I bring to this journey. So welcome, and let's go for a tour. Parks are natural places, not just for the flaneur, but also for heritage. These are artificial constructions of nature, built usually in the 19th century, organized continually, planted, planned, thought through. They are locations, of course, for free time, for reflection. They have elements of the sacred, and it is natural thus that people interested in heritage plant monuments in parks and encourage people to encounter nature and history in a thoughtful way. This park strikes me as very East German in the sense that it is ever so slightly neglected. Stones are tumbling down, some steps are missing from paths. There are really only a few new signs here, but I feel that otherwise it's quite unchanged from East German times. East Germany was never as well resourced as West Germany or Western Europe. And so many external things were ever so slightly neglected. You could say neglected, or you could just say that resources and surfaces had a different significance, a different meaning. Things were, in a sense, more natural. The process of decay is allowed. This is a map of the Dulauer Heide, the park that we are visiting today. In the following, I'm going to take you on a tour of the park, and we're going to stop at the various monuments, the various artifacts of the park. And through a discussion of these monuments, I'll try to convey to you the way that heritage and the making of heritage has changed over the past century. And in this way, we get a good sense of the political, but also religious construction of heritage in the space of the park. Here's the oldest sign I've found, probably from the early 20th century, before heritage was an issue. It was just a signpost telling people how to get to the Sundbergweg. The crossing of two paths, of two streets, is often seen as a place of the sacred. It demarcates two areas. It also leaves us two choices, or three. The cross, of course, is like this. And in the crisis theology of Paul Tillich, a Protestant theologian from the early 20th century, he lived in a time of crisis, and he saw the kairos, the time of decision, as marking an important way to approach the cross of Christianity. And in a sense, heritage is also about turning off of the main road onto a side road, into a little path down the road of memory, and also into a potentially remainder of a sacred secular. And here we find, forgotten somewhat, just such a monument. This is a monument to the 1st of May demonstration, which was held in 1890 by Hollandese workers. And it was this area that the workers used to meet illegally during the socialist laws of the 1870s and 1880s. So it was here that they first held their celebration of International Workers' Day. And this monument was obviously built during the East German period, so it was already a memory. It was an instrumentalization of this working class past, as well as a memory of it. And it says at the bottom, durch Kampf zum Sieg, through struggle to victory. And that is, of course, the ideology behind East Germany, the continual revolution. At that point, of course, just ideology, because there was no real struggle anymore. The monument, carved out of red granite, is from the local stone of Halle. And this monument is now overgrown with weeds, and is probably no longer the site of a pilgrimage every May, except perhaps by some retired communists. Here's a sign designating the bishop's fields. In the medieval period, this would have been used by the bishop for grazing, but it's an appropriate symbol of the shift of the sacred from the bishop to the social democratic movement. In the period of the 1870s and 1880s, when socialists were outlawed, they would meet secretly here in the woods. And it was here that they held their first May Day demonstration in 1890, which is the year they were allowed to operate freely again. In this photo, we see a gathering, a party in the woods of socialists dressed in their Sunday best, meeting around 1906 for a day out. In 1961, the park here was placed under natural protection. That is a step towards becoming natural heritage. And since the reunification, there's been increasing attention to archaeological remains found in the park. There are many sites here of burial, and here we learn that there was something of a defensive fortification from the Stone Age. When I first came here about 5 years ago, I was attracted to this display, which struck me as the newest form of sacred heritage work in the park. And this is an information column dedicated to nature. Nature, seems to me, after the Wende, became the new sacred, unpolitical, apparently eternal, but also endangered. But we see here that this, after 5 years, is already being erased. So heritage is something that has to be continually renewed, updated and is continually under attack from the process of forgetting nature, time, and of course culture, laying new meanings on top. Heilige Hallen, the Holy Halls. This was a designation given at the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century in the Age of Sensibility to a oak forest north of the Hertha Ice. It was a destination for students, even to the beginning of the 20th century, but also for duelists who used this as a location for their duels. The Romantic is also a religious designation, because after the death of politics and the decline of nature, as you can see, the trees, the oak trees are dying. In a post-secular moment, the Romantic again becomes attractive. It's numinous, vague, loosely tied to nature, mysterious, individual. These are things that appeal today. The park is littered with these sculptures, roughly cut, mostly with chainsaws, depicting old figures, humans that seem to blend in with nature, some of them perhaps historical. They're designed to immediately begin to fade away, get covered in algae, moss, and rot. Something primitive from the early 21st century, harking back to maybe Berlach or Kitakovitz. In their way, very East German, but recent. Another of these expressionistic, hand-carved statues of forest spirits. To me, they evoke the idea of original inhabitants of the forest, of original Germans, of the prehistoric. And this is a mythic figure on the top looking like Charles Darwin, but at the bottom with some type of eagle's claw. And the name is perhaps Waldgeist, forest spirit. Careful, this is not an object for playing. Two retired Hallenese. Who are they? What have they seen? What do they think of when they walk through the forest? Those are questions I have, but I'm not going to ask today.